What's going on, everybody? This is Randall Barnes, the founder of HBCU Pulse and the host of HBCU Pulse Radio, in the building for another special edition of the show on today, where we are talking about week 8 of the HBCU football season and previewing week 9. A lot of very interesting matchups that happened on last week. I have Arielle Kilgore in the building, North Carolina A&T alumna. I know she has a lot of thoughts about the game of the week. How you doing today, Arielle?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Just recovering, from GHOE, one of the greatest homecomings on earth, if anyone has something to say about it. But yeah, the game was not as we expected, and there was a lot of chaos running up into it being homecoming week. So yeah, I don't know where A&T goes from here at this point.
Well, let's go on and talk about it. So North Carolina A&T lost homecoming 59-17. They started off real nice. I was like, oh, wait a minute, A&T gonna win this game. And it was 14-3. But ultimately, Hampton just stormed back. And I know it's been a lot of chatter in A&T Aggie Nation about what's been going on. So I want to hear your thoughts, Arielle. Like, that was your game of the week, but you did choose the right team. You chose the Hampton will win. I wanted to go back and check. I was like, you chose Hampton? You chose Hampton. So I got to just hear from you. What are your thoughts on the game? And also, what are your thoughts on where A&T goes from here?
So with the game, usually during homecoming, and this is now where A&T, this will be the third year consecutively that we lost our homecoming game, but this was also in the first 2 years that we have seen A&T play an HBCU opponent, even though this opponent is in our conference. So this was the CAA matchup could likely determine where Hampton may go in the rest of the CAA, but we both know North Carolina A&T is going nowhere now with them being 1-6. In the beginning of the game, they were essentially about to blow out Hampton. They went up 0-14 in the first quarter. But then after the second, A&T never scored anymore. Running game was blocked. Our quarterback threw 2 interceptions. There are a lot of mistakes that Hampton brought out in this, and also kept having them consecutively that allowed them to go up 59-17 for it to be its final score. To me, A&T really played a sloppy game with many of the drop balls and the missed connections that I've saw from FAMU on that day. And to me, he's never been the greatest quarterback, but he does have some kind of distinction and somewhat of an arm where most of his catches aren't drops or misses. So a lot of him being focused on the field, to me, I think contributed to A&T losing as well. But as of right now, A&T is not having this. They haven't had a good season since they moved out of MEAC conference play 3 years ago, and is starting to see that maybe this isn't the right path for A&T. Will we see them go back into the MEAC? Cannot tell. That is up to our other Chancellor Martin, but in this case, I don't see A&T playing out really well and trying to play in these bigger competitions if we're not getting the recruiting, if we're not having the coaching that we want. To be blown out like this at a homecoming game is unacceptable to me. And I think we might be looking at a whole new team, a whole new roster possibly coming into this next season, because what we have right now isn't working.
I totally agree. And I just think that from the outside looking in, this ain't the A&T that we know. I mean, this is not the A&T that we're used to. And I think that, and I know we talked about it on this show, I think we have to have a serious look at Vincent Brown. I mean, I know that it's his second year. I know that he was brought in, former NFL guy, and he was brought in because he was on that William and Mary staff. And they brought him in because he's seen success in the CAA. But I just think that his philosophy and what he's doing on that team and his coaching staff, it's just simply not working, because it's not like A&T doesn't have talent on this team. There's been talent the past 2 seasons under Vincent Brown. But I just think that at this point, if it's not, hey, we're going to try Vincent Brown out in the MEAC, like if that's not the immediate path, which of course that gets tricky because now that gets outside the football field and that gets into the president's office, the athletic director's office, that goes up for a vote. So we know that that's not going to be the immediate path. But something has to give, because it just seems as if the team gave up on them from my vantage point, because you go up 14-0, then it's 14-3 in the second quarter, and then Hampton comes back and you only score 3 points within that run. Hampton scores 59. Like that's unacceptable for homecoming, really for any game, But for homecoming specifically, when you have all that energy, North Carolina A&T, one of the biggest homecomings in the world, it's world renowned, and this is the football product. I mean, I think that matters. I mean, the culture matters, the concerts matter, the gathering of the alumni matter. But I think that what happens on that field matters, especially for North Carolina A&T. And I hear a lot of alumni, and of course, I'm not a North Carolina A&T alumni, although I feel like it. I have a lot of Aggies that work with me, Arielle, got Croy, got Kamani, a lot of Aggies that work with me. But I just feel like, to me, that like a lot of alumni that are older that were from like the late 2000s, early 2010s, they talk about, well, we've seen worse from A&T. Like, we've seen them lose 26 straight games. And that's fine. I totally understand that. That is the past. And then what happened after that is that coach was fired, and then you bring in Rob Broadway, and now a dynasty is built in the 2010s. But this is unacceptable now, because the college football landscape in the late 2000s, early 2010s is different than what it is right now. The transfer portal, NIL, you're in a different conference. You were losing in the MEAC, now you're losing in the CAA. So I really think that it has to start with the head coach. And I hate to always put coach's feet to the fire, but it has to start with a reevaluation of who is leading the program. And I don't like to call for coaches' jobs, because that's a black man and he has to provide for his family. But I just don't think it's working, Arielle. I really don't.
No, it's not working at all. And if he doesn't do something coming this spring with his recruiting class, some A&T will figure something out. But I don't either. They're not going to stay in this conference this long, or some lead changes are going to have to happen.
I agree. I know that one thing, my guy, D2 HBC football, his name's Kendrick, we talk about when it comes to conference realignment, and we talk about it often in the SIAC, like talking about like a Morehouse jumping to the MEAC or Tuskegee leaving the SIAC. We often talk about that. He always says that when it comes to conference realignment, it's not necessarily about winning. It's about what is in the best interest of your program. But I think for A&T, this to me was a lateral move. Because, I mean, it's not like you went FBS. If you went to the Sun Belt and you haven't won in 2 years, I can understand that, because you in the FBS, you getting FBS money. The gate is a little bit larger. You got a good TV deal or whatever. I can sort of understand that. But you made two lateral moves. You move from the MEAC to the Big South. You leave that Celebration Bowl money that you dominated in the past. Then you move to the CAA, and it's like you can be down. I mean, so I don't think it even was a good move from that business sense. I just think that it was a move because there was issues probably in the background with the MEAC. But I just don't understand why A&T is doing this. Like, we need a good competitive A&T. And I say this wholeheartedly. Like, I honestly want to be wrong. I want to be wrong because like, honestly, when I looked at that score, because I wasn't like watching the game at that time, because around that time FAMU and Jackson State was playing. That was my game of the week. I looked down at the scoreboard. I'm like, oh, Arielle gonna be talking so much smack on Wednesday. I'm like, she is going to get me, because if A&T ends up winning this game, it's gonna be crazy. But it just simply didn't happen, and I think that changes need to be made. But along to my game of the week, FAMU versus Jackson State. Jackson State actually beat FAMU. It was an amazing game. I want to talk about the football element of it, but we have to start with this, because we have some pretty upsetting news to report for HBCU alumni that really want to see the growth of HBCU football. So we got the numbers back for the broadcast for the FAMU Jackson State game on ESPNU. It got 26,000 views per TV media blog. The number was the second worst. That viewership number for all the TV games was the second worst of the weekend, only slightly ahead by 3,000 on the ESPNU broadcasted Friday evening game, which is Brown and Princeton from the Ivy League, another FCS league where Brown and Princeton were playing. That drew 23,000 views. And you had North Dakota State, South Dakota State. That was a top two matchup in the FCS, a really good game. I got an opportunity to watch that as well, because Georgia was beating up on Texas. I got an opportunity to watch that game. Really good game. That got 174,000 viewers on ESPN2. Now we look at that number by comparison. Jackson State and FAMU, Arielle, 94% viewership drop from the Orange Blossom Classic in 2023. That was on ESPN. So, and that was in week one. That game got 438,000 viewers on ESPN. So it's very disheartening. And it's hard for me because, we could talk about football, but when it comes to HBCU football, really college football, there's a business element of what we talk about as fans. And I think that happens all across sports. But I think with HBCU football, we care about what happens on that field, but we also care about the visibility and the viewership for our programs. And I think that real quick before I get to the football, I want to sort of give some causation as to why these numbers were what they were. So ESPNU has a lower distribution than ESPN and ESPN2. ESPNU is in 36 million homes. That's down from like 70 million 10 years ago. So it's in 36 million homes. So that's one of the reasons why that number was so low. Because I was talking to some folks on Twitter when we announced that the game was going to be on ESPNU. It seems like a big deal. Because, ESPN Plus, that's a paywall. If you're like a new thing, you might not be able to watch it unless you have ESPN Plus. But if you just want to see the game, you heard about FAMU and Jackson State, you know about when Deion was there, you know about when Willie Simmons were there, you just want to watch the game. If you're on ESPN Plus or you don't have ESPN Plus, you can't watch it. And then you might have other plans. It's homecoming. You got other things going on. But ESPNU is on TV. You can DVR it. It's not free. You're paying for the service, but it's not out of your routine if you don't have ESPN Plus. You know what I mean? So we all thought that, hey, this is a great move. And we've seen that some of those ratings numbers looked really good on ESPNU, even for Division II football games that, of course, have a smaller audience. But it didn't do that for FAMU. But you also got to look at this as well. It was other big games. You had Alabama and Tennessee, which Tennessee beat Alabama. That got 10.7 million viewers on ABC. You had Michigan and Illinois. That was on CBS, 3 million viewers. Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, 1.5 million. So it is really unfortunate that this game that Arielle, we were both hyped over. This is a huge game when it comes to the SWAC race. It's a FCS top 25 matchup coming into this game. So these are two of the top 25 entering this game FCS teams. And we know FAMU can't make the playoffs because they had to reschedule that game because of the hurricane. And they had to reschedule Alabama A&M, and that game's going to be on the 29th before the SWAC championship. But Jackson State can still make it if they lost. Who knows what could happen in that instance, right? But people didn't watch it. And I don't think it's an indictment on the football. I think it was a great game. I think it's ESPN. And I'll say this, and I'll move on to the football. I think that ESPN has to stop doing HBCU football like this, because if we want to be honest, this game would have probably been better and had done better on ESPN Plus. Because at the very least, there's some folks that do not have ESPNU. If it was solely on ESPN Plus, there are more people that can go get ESPN Plus to watch the game. And I will definitely stand by that. But the football element of it, it was a really great game. I thought the game was really evenly matched. I thought Jackson State and FAMU, they were going tit for tat. They were going blow for blow. But the whole entire game changed when Jackson State forced 2 fumbles from FAMU. It effectively iced the game. One of the fumbles, Daniel Richardson holding the ball, and then it was punched away from him. I honestly was shocked. They returned that touchdown with Daniel Richardson. It was a strip sack fumble, and they turned that fumble into a touchdown. When I tell you, like, my eyes, I was like, what the world? Because when that happened, I was actually looking down on my phone because there's so many other games going on, so much other things happening. And then, I'm writing for Clutch Points. I'm covering the game, seeing what's happening. And I look up right when Daniel Richardson was trying to find the pass. And then the Jackson State defender got to him, and then the ball was fumbled. When Jackson State went up, I'm like, yo, they're about to win this game. I think I tweeted it, like, they're about to win this game. Like, Jackson State is really about to take control of the SWAC East. And I don't think anybody first saw that. I think that people, and I think we did too, we saw FAMU as this dominant juggernaut because of the profile of what they've done in the Willie Simmons era. And then you still have the pieces of Willie Simmons' team. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the conference in Daniel Richardson. We just thought they were going to just run through and win the game. But that didn't happen. 35-21, Jackson State won. Unfortunately, we were wrong as far as our picks. But who could have known? Because, I mean, if you look at the game, it's not like, oh, FAMU just disappeared. Like, they just played uncharacteristic. FAMU played FAMU football. Daniel Richardson had an amazing game. 248 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. So it was a normal Daniel Richardson game. He had some great throws. He was able to throw receivers open, he had one bullet pass that he threw into the end zone. It was super duper tough. So Daniel Richardson was Daniel Richardson. FAMU had a classic game, but the one thing that they could not stop was the run game for Jackson State. Like, Jackson State's run attack was prolific. They rushed for over 200 yards. Then you have Irv Mulligan, who Arielle, we both talked about back last year. 18 carries, 139 yards, 1 touchdown, 7.7 yards per carry. He was unstoppable. FAMU could not do anything to stop that run attack. Jacoby Morgan was great. He threw for over 100 yards doing his thing, but the rushing attack and really the defense, especially at the end, they're really who stepped up. I still think FAMU is an elite team, but this is a different team than what we saw in the Willie Simmons era. And I had a feeling, I'm like, should we have picked Jackson State? I don't know. I don't know if maybe Jackson State was the team that we picked, though, that we could have picked. Maybe we could have. But at this point, I don't know. I don't know. Jackson State, it looks like they're in the driver's seat. It looks like Jackson State, because I'm looking at their schedule. I don't think Alabama State beats them. They already beat Alabama A&M. I mean, like, I don't know if they're going to lose at any point in time before the SWAC championship. So I honestly believe that they're poised to go back to the SWAC championship, probably play Southern, and then we're going to really see what's popping. So I don't know. We were wrong on this one, but it wasn't like FAMU played a different game. Daniel Richardson was in his bag. They had some really great plays. It was close throughout the game. But, hey, listen, Jackson State proved us wrong, and I think Jackson State just might be going to that SWAC championship. I don't know. So, Arielle, we are at the halfway point of the season. Homecoming is almost at its end, so it's really getting into conference play, getting into who's going to be the conference champion, and we're going to eventually get to who's going to make the Celebration Bowl and possibly who makes the FCS playoffs. So, what is your game of the week?
And you know what? Speaking of, again, in conference play, the MEAC finally has their first one coming up in week 9. And I would have to say my game of the week is definitely going to be South Carolina State and Delaware. South Carolina State, for me, go ahead and make my pick, is already going to win. But it's interesting just to see how South Carolina State does with having the new coach, Chennis Berry, and being a new team, and now having the possibility to overcome Howard and maybe take that second place or at least compete to be in the Celebration Bowl, where Central has a little bit more competition in Morgan State. And now, since these games are starting to matter, South Carolina State wins this game, they can either tie their record with North Carolina Central, depending on if they win or if they lose, or they can go ahead and jump Howard and take that second place. So we're starting to see competition. I want to see how they do in their first conference game that they have against Delaware State, but South Carolina State may be on the path to victory with this one.
I feel that. I think South Carolina State is going to win this dominantly. But I will say this about South Carolina State. They did play Fort Valley on last Saturday. I wasn't really impressed with their offense. I honestly wasn't. I know Eric Phoenix is an amazing quarterback. You got a lot of the Benedict guys back there. DeAndre Duhart from Macon, Georgia. If you from Macon, like, I'm going to rock with you. But that offense, especially to start off, I mean, because you would think that as the game goes along, it's going to get better. And ultimately, they did start to score. But I think that in the Fort Valley South Carolina State game, it went to death. Because it's like you have a South Carolina State team that has a more allotment of scholarships. I think that the depth started to really show. But at the start of that game, like, they had a hard time almost flipping the field until they had like one big run by Casey Adams, I believe, that got them that in that red zone and got that first touchdown. So I don't really know. I mean, I don't think they're going to struggle with offense against Delaware State, but I think that they're going to really need to warm up because you still got to face North Carolina Central. I mean, and you still got to face even Howard. I mean, because we look at Southern in the SWAC, like, they got beat down by Nichols, but now, like, they're like in the driver's seat in the SWAC West. Who's to say that's not going to be Howard? That Howard gets beat by Tennessee State. They're in these close games against teams that they should have beaten. And then they're like, hey, like, they might be struggling. Then they get to the MEAC play and they start like not knocking everybody down. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I really don't. So I think South Carolina State needs to be careful. They're going to easily win this game, but they need to be careful because that offense, I don't know. I don't really like it at all. But my game of the week is FAMU versus Southern. So this is an old school rivalry type of matchup. I remember back when they first played after years in 2019. They played, I think, the last time before 2019, they played in like 2011. It was always a game that the fan bases got hyped for, that national HBCU fandom was really hyped for, because you have Southern that is a blue blood in HBCU football. FAMU is as well, but they're known for their culture and their alumni and all the amazing things that they do. And that game was amazing. Of course, you have the band battles, Human Jukebox, Marching 100, all these different things. Then you have FAMU that goes to the SWAC, and we're all like, man, we're going to get FAMU versus Southern on a semi-regular basis, even though FAMU is in the SWAC East and you have Southern that's in the SWAC West. But they play, pretty religiously ever since FAMU's entered the SWAC these past 3 years. So now you have a Southern team coming in. They were struggling to start the year. Their offense was not looking good, but we maybe can say, was it the competition? Because now they're 2-0 in the SWAC West. They're in the driver's seat in the SWAC West. And it might look like they might be the ones who make the SWAC championship and possibly play Jackson State. But you have a FAMU team that just got beat by Jackson State, and they want to get their lick back. Like they want to feel like, hey, we're the defending Celebration Bowl champions. We're going to get back right. And if Jackson State stumbles a little bit, if they lose a game or two, we're going to get right back in there, because it's never over till it's over. So I think that FAMU on Saturday, they're going to come out trying to prove something and trying to say, hey, we're still the guys. We still got Daniel. We still got Daniel Richardson. We still have these amazing players on offense and defense. The run game is a little bit shaky. We'll see if Southern can take advantage of that. But we still got Daniel Richardson. We still got the closer. Like, we still have an amazing offense. And James Colsey showed he's a really good coach and he has a good coaching staff, although there are some adjustments that could be made this week against Southern. So, honest, it's going to be hard to really pick this one, but I'll say FAMU. I honestly will say FAMU, because I think FAMU really get, their groove back. But here's the thing, though. This is not going to negatively impact Southern, because they're still 2-0 in the SWAC West. FAMU is a SWAC East team. So playing FAMU is almost like playing an out-of-conference game in a way. It still counts in the SWAC standings, and it counts in the hearts of fans around the nation, but it's not going to deter them or hurt them from getting to the SWAC championship if that is indeed their path. So I think that because of that, I think FAMU's going to win, and Southern will be all right.
Yeah, after that performance, seeing FAMU go down to JSU, you see kind of where they're going structurally when it comes to offense, but I'm not too worried playing against Southern. I think Southern has more discrepancies than FAMU does, and FAMU is a little bit more put together despite what happened between Jackson State. I think it was just a bad game for them. I would say FAMU will win this over Southern, but I wouldn't be surprised if they gave them much competition at all if it is a close game.
So, Arielle, where can we find you on social media?
You can follow me on my new website, arielkilgore.canva.com, or put me in the hot seat on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @askriri__, or follow me on Instagram at __.moderndateari.
Like what you hear?
Yeah.
Subscribe to HBCU Pulse Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, head to hbcupulse.com to stay up to date on what's going on in the HBCU community. Thank you for listening to HBCU Pulse Radio.